If there is a proper evidence, then it means that the books of accounts is properly maintained by the organization. Oching is very required or very essential for an auditing process. When an auditor comes for this auditing process, so when he examines that transaction, so each and every transaction should have a documentary evidence. So here the success of auditing process largely depends upon the oching process. Here, in order to detect these errors as well as fraud, this oching process is conducted. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Today we are in the first session of Unit 4, that is Oching. Let us see what is this oching and what we are going to discuss in this particular unit. So, let us say what is the meaning of oching. So, my dear students, I have already told you. So, in order to record in the books of account, so each and every transactions cannot be recorded randomly. So, there should be a documentary evidence for each and every transaction. So, that is in case of recording also, in the same way, when an auditor goes for this auditing process, so when he examines the books of account, that is each and every transaction, so there should be a proper documentary evidence. So for this, what the accountants will do, so while recording the transaction, there should be a documentary evidence which is called as ochers. At the same time, so that documentary evidence will be preserved till the end of the financial year. That is, if any auditor comes for the auditing process, so that ochers also should be given to the auditor to verify the books of accounts or to examine the books of accounts. So that ochers, that documentary evidence is called as ochers. So using that ochers, so this examination or verification has to be done. So that is called as what? Oching. Let us see what is the meaning of oching. Oching is the act of checking or examining the entries made in the books of account with a supporting documentary evidence or ochers. So using that documentary evidence or using that ochers, so if an auditor examines the books of account, that process is called as oching. Hope you are clear with the meaning of oching. So what is this oching? So for each and every transaction, there should be a documentary evidence. So when an auditor comes for this auditing process, so when he examines that transaction, so each and every transaction should have a documentary evidence. So he will verify both documentary evidence or ochers and the transaction which is recorded in the books of account. So that process is called as oching. So in the words of L.R. Dixie, oching is an act of comparing entries. So comparing entries in the books of accounts with the documentary evidence, that is in support thereof. So for support of a transaction, so this documentary evidence will be compared with the transactions in the books of account. So that is known as oching. Now let us see what are the objectives of oching. The objective of oching is to ensure that the transactions as recorded in the books of accounts are acceptable, genuine, as well as it is correct. So for each and every transaction in the books of account, if there is a documentary evidence, it means what? So here the books of account they have maintained is proper. Suppose if a transaction do not have a documentary evidence, then in such cases the accountant or the staff of the organization have to give a clear explanation about the absence of that particular evidence, that is documentary evidence or ocher. So the main objective is to check the authenticity as well as genuineness of the organization of maintaining books of account. The principal objective of oching is to ensure that the transactions as recorded in the books of accounts are acceptable, genuine, properly authorized and correctly recorded. So if there is a proper evidence, then it means that the books of accounts is properly maintained by the organization. And the second objective is, another objective of vouching is to ensure that the entries made in the books of account are supported by necessary evidences, that is documentary evidences. So whether each and every transaction is supported by a proper documentary evidence or not. So in order to ensure that this vouching process is made. Next, to see that all the transactions connected with the business have been recorded in the appropriate books of accounts. So here, for example, a voucher which is not connected with the business, then it is a fake voucher, right? So here the main purpose of vouching is to see through that all the documentary evidence and the transactions are connected to each other or not, whether that transaction as well as the voucher belongs to that organization or not. So in order to verify that, this vouching is done to see that all the transactions connected with the business have been recorded in the appropriate books of account. Next, to ensure that no transactions which is not connected with the business have been recorded in the books of account. So if a transaction or if a voucher which is not connected with the business, and here vouching process makes sure that that type of transaction is not recorded in the books of account where the voucher is of some other organization. So it should be connected with the organization. At the same time, the voucher should also be connected with the organization. On the other hand, the entry in the books of account should connect with that particular voucher. Next, detection of errors and frauds. So of course, in order to detect what is the main objective of vouching is to know, or in order to detect the errors as well as frauds which is committed in an organization. So I have clearly told you about the difference. So errors means what? It is an unintentional mistake which is made in an organization. Whereas fraud, it is an intentional mistake. So here, in order to detect these errors as well as fraud, this vouching process is conducted. Now let us see what are the importance of vouching. So vouching constitutes the foundation upon which superstructure of auditing is erected. So vouching is conducted in order to see the accuracy of the auditing process. So if the vouching is proper, then of course the auditing or the report which is provided by the auditor in the form of audit report will also be correct. So it is a backbone of auditing. So vouching is what? It is a backbone of auditing. So if the vouching is proper, then of course I have told you the auditing process will also be correct. So always auditing depends upon vouching. So it is called as backbone of auditing. In the words of F.R.M. de Paula, vouching is the essence of audit. So vouching is very required or very essential for an auditing process. So vouching can be regarded as a essence or backbone of auditing for the following reasons. So why this vouching is called as backbone, or why it is called as essence of auditing process? Let us see what are the reasons for that. So the first one is, the success of an audit largely depends upon the care and attention with which vouching is accomplished. So to what extent the vouching is done at the same way or in the same way, this auditing process result will be ascertained. So the success of the audit. So here the success of auditing process largely depends upon the vouching process. So if the vouching is proper, then of course the auditing work will also be correct. So vouching is the most potent tool in the hands of an auditor to ascertain the accuracy of the transaction. Of course, auditing is nothing but verifying and examining the books of accounts in order to check the accuracy of books of account, right? So through this process of vouching, it will come to know whether each and every transaction has a proper documentary evidence, so which ultimately leads to the accuracy of audit report. So if there is proper documentary evidence, then of course the auditing process will becomes easy and the results which is obtained from auditing process will be accurate. Next, to see that all the transactions connected with the business have been recorded in the appropriate books of accounts. Of course, I have told you all the transactions should be connected with the business only. So, a transaction which is outside the business, then it means what? They are trying to fake the organization. So all the transactions. So this oching helps to know whether all the transactions are relating to the business and whether it has a proper documentary evidence. To ensure that there are no transactions which are not connected with the business and it is not recorded in the books of account. So as I told you, each and every transaction should be recorded as per the, or it should relate to business only. And if any of the transaction which is outside the business, that cannot be recorded in the books of account. Next is detection of errors and frauds. Of course, the main intention of this oching is to detect errors as well as fraud, will ultimately helps the auditing process. Oching ensures the arithmetical accuracy of the books of accounts. So through this oching process, we can check the arithmetical accuracy of books of accounts. So if oching is done with care and caution, the auditor can smoothly proceed with the auditing work. So if the oching is done carefully as well as with caution, then it ultimately leads to preparation of audit work very easily and it can be done with utmost fast. So these are the importance of oching, or where we have discussed. So why this oching is called as backbone or essence of audit. Now let us see what is this ocher. So I have already told you, for each and every transaction there should be a documentary evidence which is called as ocher, and this documentary evidence always acts as a evidence and it has to be preserved carefully inside the organization. So ocher is a documentary evidence in support of a transaction recorded in the books of accounts. So as I have already told you, so for each and every transactions which are recorded in the books of account, it should have a proper documentary evidence which is called as ocher. So it is a documentary evidence of an entry in the books of accounts. So for each and every entry, so here the accountant cannot record the entry in a random manner. So there should be a proper documentary evidence. The following are some of the examples for ochers. Let us see what are these documentary evidence. Receipt obtained from the payee. So if a person have paid, or if a person have, or if the organization have paid amount to a person, so that person will give the receipt. So this receipts act as a documentary evidence for paying the amount. Next, counterfoil of a receipt, purchase invoice, sales invoice, cash memo, bank paying slip, a contract of an agreement, a resolution passed at the meeting in the board of directors. So there are many documentary evidence or vouchers which act as a evidence for each and every transaction. So these are the some documentary evidence or vouchers. Now let us see what are the principles of vouchers. So the first one is arrange vouchers. So as I told you, this vouchers plays a very important role both in accounting process as well as auditing process. So here in auditing process, it acts as a vouching, right? So here vouching has to be done through these vouchers. Let us see what are the principal elements that has to be remembered in vouchers or in preservation of vouchers. So the first one is arrange vouchers. So first of all, the auditor should check all the vouchers provided by the client are properly arranged. So as I told, it has to be preserved properly. By whom? By the organization, because it always acts as a evidence. So first, an auditor through this auditing or vouching process, so what he has to do? So he has to see through that all the vouchers are arranged properly, because for each and every voucher there will be a number, serially numbered, and it has to be arranged according to that numbers. Clear? So here the auditor has to see through that whether the organization or client's business have maintained the voucher properly and whether it is arranged properly. So these are in the same orders as the entries are made in the books. So whatever the entries which are made in the books, in the same way this vouchers has to be arranged properly. So it will be easy for the auditor to refer each and every entry. So depending upon the vouchers as well as the transaction which are entered in the books of accounts. So that is arrangement of voucher. So here the auditor has to see through that whether the vouchers are arranged properly according to the transaction which is recorded in the books of account. And the next one is checking of date. Compare the date of the voucher. So here date of the voucher also plays a very important role. Suppose the voucher of the previous year might be included in the current year. So such kind of transaction is a fake transaction, right? So an auditor has to compare the date of the voucher with the date recorded in the same book. It is a responsibility of the auditor. So here what he has to do, he has to see the date. So date of the voucher, at the same time the date of the transaction what they have recorded in the books of account. So it should tally. Next, compare the words and figures. So here, for example, the words might be something and the figures what they have written might be something. So for that, the words as well as figures has to be checked properly. So the auditor should fully confidence about the amount written on the vouchers, its figures and the words are same. So he should see through that. So whatever the amount which is written in the voucher and the words which is written in the voucher are both are same. For example, 10,000. So how to write in the form of words? Rupees 10,000 only. So whether that amount which is written and that amount in the form of words which is written, whether these two are same. So he has to see through that. Next, checking of authority. The auditor should examine that all the vouchers are passed by authorized officers. So whether each and every voucher, here a normal person cannot prepare a voucher, right? So there should be an authorized person in order to, or who prepares that voucher. So here an auditor should see through that whether all the vouchers are done or prepared by an authorized official or person. So if the voucher is passed by unauthorized person, so it will not be correct. So if it is prepared by an unauthorized person, then this voucher does not act as a evidence because there is no value for such kind of vouchers. So it should be prepared by an authorized person. And the next one is cutting or change. So here in the voucher, they have to make sure that whether any corrections or cutting has been made by the organization. So if there is any such kind of corrections, it means that someone has faked that voucher, right? So if there is any cutting or change on the receipts and voucher figures, it should be signed by the authorized officer. So here, if any changes that has to be made in the voucher, then it has to be duly signed by that particular authorized officer. So if they have made mistakes and they have cut that amount and have rearranged or written the correct amount, then it has to be signed by an authorized person. So if it is not signed by an authorized person, it means that some fraud or error is being committed in the organization. So if any such type of changes has to be made, it has to be duly signed by the authorized officer. The auditor should be fully confident by inquiring about it. So in such cases, the auditor has a right to inquire about that changes which is made in that voucher. Next, transaction must be related to business. Of course, we are going to organize or we are going to do the auditing process of a particular organization. So here the transaction is to be relating to that particular business for which the auditor have gone for auditing process. So the auditor should carefully analyze that the entries must pertain to the business. So here the transactions, here the auditor is going to verify the transaction of a particular business. So then all the vouchers as well as the entries in the books of accounts should be relating to that particular business only. Next, case of personal voucher. So the auditor should not accept the voucher in the personal name. So if any voucher is in the personal name, then the auditor should not accept that type of voucher. There may be a chances that the officers of the company has bought any item in the personal capacity. So here the voucher which is in the name of a person or in the personal name, so such kind of vouchers cannot be accepted by an auditor. Next, checking of account head. So here the account head has to be checked properly. So auditor must be satisfied about the head of the account in which cash is being deposited and drawn. So where the cash has been deposited and drawn, so here the account head should be proper. He should analyze the documentary evidence in this regard. For this purpose, he should analyze. So he should see through the documentary evidence. Next, cancelled voucher. So if there is any cancelled voucher, let us see what are the initiatives that has to be taken by an auditor. The auditor should not accept the cancelled voucher. So if there is any cancelled voucher, so that should not be accepted by the auditor because it has already did the purpose of payment. So there will be a risk of double payment if it is accepted. So if any cancelled voucher has been, which is there in the organization, such type of vouchers cannot be accepted by an auditor. So if it accepts, there may be a chances of double recording of that particular transaction. So this cancelled voucher should not be taken by who? By the auditor. Next, complete or important note. So the auditor should take some notes about those items which need further evidence or explanation. Example, partnership deed, leases, articles of association, minutes, book contract, etc. For example, there may be a chances that the auditor might require few clarification as well as few explanation from the organization relating to these type of vouchers. So there may be a certain doubt relating to this type of voucher, then the auditor has a right to ask this evidence as well as clarification in relation to pertaining or in relation to certain type of voucher. For example, if a voucher does not give complete information about a particular transaction, during that situation, auditor may ask for another type of voucher in support to that particular transaction. In the sense, further explanation as well as clarification can be asked by the auditor to the organization. So this is all about principles of vouching. So we have discussed how this vouching has to be done and what are the points that has to be remembered by an auditor during this vouching process. In my next session, we shall discuss about teaming and ladding, a challenge to vouching. So what is this teaming and ladding and how it is a challenge to this vouching process, and we shall discuss about vouching of cash book or cash transaction. So how this vouching is made in relation to cash transaction or cash book. So my dear students, in today's session, we have discussed about vouching. See you all in my next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.